thank you. I love Bleachers. I listen to them quite a bit. They're good workout music. So I want to thank Betsy Lightbourne and Eric Clausen and Sharon Wallace and Esper and Weston's great-granddaughter, Nina Foster Weston, and others, along with the Historical Society of Philadelphia, for sharing their information with me for this talk today. And I want to emphasize that I just scratched the surface on this talk. I'm keeping it a little short because I want to introduce you to a whole bunch of new members today, so I want to save time for that. But I hope others of you will go to the Historical Society and research the letters and notes and board minutes and addresses and financial reports that really are the scaffolding of our history. Now, in 2 weeks, on June 1st, I'll be giving my last platform talk here as leader of the Ethical Society, and that is going to be exactly 125 years after our founding. On June 1st, 1885 is when we were founded. Now, then I will focus next time on my time here at the Ethical Society and moving forward as a community, you all. But today I'm going to look back and explore our founding, particularly the man at the center of our community for a half a century. Esper and Weston's. He served from 1885 to 1934 and was at the helm of this institution in different ways. He served notably without salary. I cannot accept such a noble, I can't follow that, but I love the emphasis. He was followed by Edwin Collier, Lester Mondale, Ken Smith, that some of you know, Judith Eckerson, who I met when I was an intern at the Northern Virginia Ethical Society, and Richard Canary, our beloved leader. It's been an honor to follow in those footsteps. Now, for some context, and looking back, I want to say, well, what was Philadelphia like back in 1885? It was a bustling city of about 850,000 people. It was a center of manufacturing and trade and finance and culture and education. The University of Pennsylvania and the Women's Medical College drew students from all over. In 1884, Temple was founded as a night school for working class family folk. The free library system was open to everybody, and electric trolleys were just beginning to whiz around the city at the breakneck speed of 12 miles an hour, which, believe it or not, caused accidents because the horse-drawn carriages that went at less than half that speed made a clattering on the cobblestones and warned people, but the trolleys surprised pedestrians. Residents spent their leisure time and disposable income, if they had it, at theater or the Pythian Baseball Club or the fully stocked department stores not far from here of Wanamaker's and Strawbridge's and Gimbel Brothers. But most Philadelphians could not afford those luxuries. They had less expensive options like minstrel shows and circuses and dance halls that sprung up in working class neighborhoods of Kensington, Tenderloin, Northern Liberties, and Fishtown. But even those amusements were out of reach for many because there were a series of nationwide depressions. 1873 and 83 and 93 really drove a great deal of poverty in this city. The newspapers began to divide the working class into two groups. They called them the rowdy and the respectable. The rowdy might engage in bar fights or street crime, but both groups got radicalized as the wage gap grew in this city. Philadelphia in 1877 became the epicenter of labor unrest with the Great Railroad Strike. It occurred all over this city, started here and spread out. Fearing class war, the business elites built 6 armories, like the one on 23rd between Chestnut and Market, that housed the troops and the weapons and the armored vehicles used to suppress any potential riots that might occur. Municipal authorities also sought other ways to control poor people, frankly. Vagrancy laws were passed that were meant to deal with what was called the tramp menace. Adolescents who roamed the streets selling flowers or oranges or rags or whatever they could find or steal were harassed. They were often sent along with women and disabled people to the almshouse that was in West Philadelphia. Local charities really grew. In 1880, 15% of the residents of this city received some form of charity. This was the time ripe for Samuel Burns Weston to start a new philanthropic organization and come to Philadelphia. So, who was he? Well, he and his twin brother were born in Madison, Maine on March 10th, 1855. Their father, Stephen, worked as a farmer, a teacher, a school administrator, a town clerk, and even in the Maine State Assembly. Samuel attended Antioch College. We have a graduate of Antioch here, I believe. Thank you, Nick. maybe more. He had to work his way through as a janitor. He succeeded. He went to Harvard, where he earned a divinity degree in theology. He became minister at the Leicester, Massachusetts Unitarian Church, but early on it was pretty clear that it was not a good fit. He talked a lot about Christ the person, but his humanist leanings struck some of the members as too radical. He called for social reform, and that annoyed one particularly wealthy church donor who preferred the traditional Christian worship, according to him. So Weston preferred the Transcendental Movement, the Free Religious Association, and a new project started in 1876 in New York by Felix Adler, our congregational alternative to traditional religion. So soon, Weston, along with a friend, William Salter, began training for ethical culture clergy leadership. Weston studied in New York, and Berlin, and Leipzig, and Geneva, and in the mid-1880s, Felix Adler sent Weston to Philadelphia a number of times to see if the city of brotherly and sisterly love would welcome an ethical society. Weston wrote that it was, quote, a quest which lasted over a period of many months and from which very little encouragement was received. In fact, a good deal of cold water was thrown on the project, end quote. But he persisted. Here we are. On Easter Sunday of 1885, under a bright, clear sky, 60 people arrived at the City Institute, which was on the corner of 18th and Chestnut Street. Felix Adler delivered a talk that day entitled "The Need of an Ethical Religion." He described, quote, a rational, constructive, progressive religion, one that will give to ethical ideals the place hitherto given to theological creeds, one that while holding fast to the ethical truth of the past will press forward and search by scientific methods for new formulations of duty. A religion that can satisfy the mind and the heart, and that would strengthen the will to do one's duty in every relation of life. In short, an ethical religion. Now, the society was legally founded on June 1st, as I mentioned, and was fully open for business later that fall. Weston reported to the board that despite the smallness of our numbers, the slowness of our growth, and the meagerness of our resources, our faith in the principles and the aim of the ethical society was sufficient to keep up our courage and to stimulate us to press quietly and steadily on, end quote. He immediately dove into administrative tasks and social service projects. The importance of children's education was a constant theme. He wrote, "We should feel a profound responsibility towards this effort to provide the future citizens of the state a broad and thorough education." And a weekly children's ethical class was established. And I'm so glad we have the seeds of another one growing today. Weston's attention was drawn away by what he called street boys. In his first annual report to the board, he said some boys, quote, invaded the society. But they were quickly organized into what he called the Working Boys Guild that became the Neighborhood Guild, offering social services to young people. Regarding finances, Weston said that the first year was relatively healthy. He wrote that, quote, no money-making schemes were necessary. I didn't know we schemed you, but as the society grew, so did the expenses. The 1920 budget totaled $10,300, which was a hearty sum back then, about $164,000 in today's dollars. Relative consistency there. He said that the society grew with its expenses. This is how the money was broken down. About half of that $10,000 went to salaries. $1,400 went to guest lecture fees. Since the society had yet to get a building, $1,500 went to rent. And musicians were paid a total of $750, and $250 went to the American Ethical Union. Weston found this work demanding. He explained years later that the directorship of the Ethical Society, quote, requires an amount of executive work and constant attention to many details that few of you perhaps fully appreciate. Like today, the building required a lot of attention. He wrote about roof leaks, and he wrote about the need for a air filtration system for the auditorium. Like today, rentals had to be managed. Like today, actually, dance groups apply to use our building. And like today, the board turned down a dance group because neighbors were so angry about the noise. So some problems just go for centuries. To address all of those challenges, Weston shifted his focus. He had never been a dynamic speaker, and after 5 years of being coached by Felix Adler about the content and style of his presentations, he convinced his friend William Salter to become the lecturer here, a term that Adler used. In addition to Salter, who was the leader at the Chicago Society and had to leave there after his radical statements were tied up in the Haymarket incident, so he cooled off in Philadelphia. He eventually went back to Chicago. And Weston began to bring in many other speakers and such luminaries like William James or Jane Addams or William Lloyd Garrison or Walt Whitman. Speaking less freed Weston to focus on organizational projects. So he did a lot of work in the city. He co-founded the Contemporary Club. He chaired the local chapters of the Woodrow Wilson Foundation and the American Civil Liberties Union. And he was one of the first sponsors of the Marriage Council. He also helped the Ethical Society become a major publisher. In 1888, Weston began a 25-year stint as an editor of an ethical culture journal. It went through 3 names, and they settled on eventually Ethical Addresses, which is full of the words of wisdoms of ethical culture leaders and speakers. And many of those volumes, dirty and deteriorating, sit on the shelves of the leader's office right now. When I take them off, they begin to crumble like in a sci-fi movie or something, so I no longer go to those. A personal highlight for Weston's wife was marrying Mary Hartshorn. This was on October 8th of 1892. Her father was a railroad tycoon by the name of Charles Hartshorn, and he became a major benefactor to both the Philadelphia and the St. Louis Ethical Societies. Mary's sister happened to marry Walter Sheldon, who became the first leader of the St. Louis Society. And as Eric Clausen wrote, quote, "It would be fair to say that without Esper and Weston's marriage into the Hartshorn family, the Philadelphia and St. Louis Ethical Societies would look very different today than they do, and perhaps they would not even exist." So, that is not a pitch for donations. Yeah, sure, it's a pitch for donations. All right, we'll go there. So. Because that sort of largesse facilitated the charity work of the Ethical Society. In 1906, Weston helped the Society with one of its major projects by founding the Southwark Neighborhood House, serving the neighborhoods bounded by Delaware River and South Street in Passyunk. It offered social services to folks of all kinds, to the growing immigrant population that settled in that area, particularly children. And this led to the creation of a summer camp in the Perkiomen Valley, I don't know that valley, in 1915. And later, Ethical Society member Jenny Fells convinced her husband, Samuel Fells, of the Fells Naphtha Soap Company, to donate $128,000 to purchase this home on Rittenhouse Square. Thank goodness for that, and for the fact that she convinced him to donate nearly 70 acres of land to the Ethical Society, where our Camp Linden program now flourishes. It's been a refuge for children for generations. It worked with Quaker and Presbyterian and Jewish congregations to keep it going, and we need all of you to be a part of that project as it continues forward. The camp also offered Weston an opportunity to commune with nature, which is a love that he shared with Felix Adler, the founder. Both men appreciated the spiritually rejuvenating power of the natural world. Like Adler, who found hiking in the hiking in the Alps, right before he went to graduate school, a deeply formative experience, Weston was drawn to mountain landscapes. Both men built cabins in the Adirondacks and invited their friends and relatives to come lift their spirits in the peaks. Weston used a climbing metaphor to describe ethical persistence, something we all need more in today's world. In a talk in 1887, he explained, "As with the alpine traveler who climbs in mountain after mountain only to find them enveloped in clouds, but who finally 1,000 times is repaid for his long and wearisome ascent and descents by finding himself standing at last upon one of those majestic heights under cloudless skies, viewing the infinite beauty and surrounding scene of alpine glaciers and snow-white peaks. So it is with the moral world. Weary toil, and it may be many disappointments, is the price we must pay before seeing our ideals realized. So keep the faith." Weston then read this poem. I don't know the author. Tell me if you know it. "We have not wings, we cannot soar, but we have feet to scale and climb by slow degrees and more the cloudy summits of our time. Nor deemed the irrevocable past as wholly wasted, wholly vain, if rising on its wrecks at last to something nobler we attain." Esper Weston handed down these lofty ideals and his love of nature to his children. One of his sons, Harold, who is a wonderful naturalist painting that I didn't know about before researching, remembers as a kid he and his brother would collect moss from the rocks to stuff between the wood boards of the cabins to keep it a little warmer. A 2023 article in Adirondack Life called Esperance Weston a, quote, kind of a hippie of his time. I saw his hair. It didn't strike me that way, but his granddaughter, Nina, told me that she thought maybe they used that term because Weston liked to sort of live off the land for a few summer months every year. But Nina, who was 8 years old when Esper Weston died, described him not as a hippie, but as a member of what she said was the avant-garde, because he would be one of many who would gather eclectic and very diverse people from all socioeconomic and racial backgrounds to gather to participate in conversations and good works. Now, Weston spent many hours writing and planning for ethical culture in a rustic mountainside retreat that was away from the other building that everybody lived in that was loud and noisy. It was on a cliff, and just down the cliff from that little cabin, his ashes were buried, and it's marked by a small plaque that reads, "Between this man and the cause he served fell no shadow of self." Felt no shadow of self. He was a selfless worker for ethical good in this world. So I want to spend the rest of the time going in a little bit more to some of the themes that Weston focused on. The first is how proud he was of the fact that the society encouraged women to assume leadership roles. He wrote, "No other ethical society owes so much to its women as does ours, and no other society has so completely and unreservedly acted on the principle of absolute equality between the sexes. In 1916, he told a gathering of the Women's Club that from the start, the society had women on the board as members and officers. He mentioned a couple of examples. The president of the New Century Club was Mary Thorne Lewis. She was the society's first secretary and a PES board member. And also Dr. Frances Emily White, who taught at the Women's Medical College. White was the first woman to give a talk before an ethical society, and she served on the board. As Betsy Lightbourne wrote in her history of PES, Jenny Fells came to ethical culture because it offered more chance for leadership by women than did her Reformed Judaism community. When she joined the society in 1896, more than half the trustees were women. Fells served as a society administrator, board secretary, and president. She was elected to the Philadelphia School Committee, joined the Pennsylvania Consumers League. She worked to improve the working conditions for women and to end child labor. She supported the Curtis Institute and the Settlement Music School. Another theme important to Weston and to us today is our commitment to non-theism. We don't take a position on whether there is a God or not. We don't take theological or metaphysical positions. Weston actually suggested only 3 requirements for being a member. He said that those who apply embrace the full courage of your convictions and that you are willing to make sacrifices and are ready for the work. Ready for the work. Weston also relatedly supported diversity in a very progressive manner. He wrote, "The Ethical Society of Philadelphia is open to all alike, to the poor as well as the rich, to the old and the young of both sexes and every race." And he emphasized deep inner ethical commitment. In one of his last director's reports to the board in 1930, Weston praised, quote, "the elevation of the moral life of its members and that of the community." And he said that commitment should pervade the space we occupy and be experienced by other visitors at the moment they walk in the door. One board member, a Mr. Quinto, confessed his fear that visitors, quote, "are not fully awake to what we really stand for and what we are really endeavoring to accomplish. It must be made clear to them the depth of our humanist faith." He continued, "Let there be warmth in our greetings to all who attend our services. Let the warmth, growth, and expansion come from within, so that the understanding and fellowship to be complete in our own ranks." That is so fundamental. It is in each of you that the ethical project has its first seed to grow. Inner growth, he also said, comes from action. We know that. On April 5th of 1885, he gave a talk called "The Need for Ethical Culture." He explained how we must develop ethically by exercising the goodwill and engaging in radical philanthropic works. He writes, quote, "As with the muscles of the body and the faculties of the mind, so the good impulses of the heart tend to grow weak unless they are called into action. A self-sacrificing act always ennobles him who performs it. A generous deed begets a generous feeling." We have to listen carefully to those generous feelings of our conscience. Weston emphasized, quote, "listening to that inner voice which urges us to work for the perfect." We shouldn't search, of course, in our tradition for the Word of God or for supernatural revelations. Those who do, Weston says, actually are, quote, "the real disbelievers," because they distrust their own moral and rational nature. Interesting. I embrace nurturing those generous feelings and our inner voice probably more than anything, but it's hard work. Weston writes, "It is easy enough to conform to the world's low standard of what is right, easier still to make hypocritical professions of good endeavors. But it is not easy to conform to our ideals of the right. It is not easy in all things and under all circumstances to be absolutely sincere and true. And yet, just this is what we should constantly strive for. We should be known, at least to our own selves and in our own secret hearts, for efforts in this direction. It's a direction, not a destination, right? Weston bemoaned how we can get comfortable with low expectations. He said, compared to many social ills, he listed poverty and crime and inequality of justice. He feared one the most, and that was moral lethargy. He said, it's a disease which, when once fastened upon the society, pollutes the very source from which every kind of noble activity springs. I mean that of moral lethargy. He continues, there is not only a lack of high moral ideals throughout the community, but that low and sordid aims have gained a frightful ascendancy in society at large. Look, for instance, at the present condition of our political life. If politics and morality were ever wedded in this country, they are today divorced. End quote. Yeah. We need ethical culture today more than we ever have. It's one reason why I'm so humbled by the dedication of this one person to a cause and a community. This organization has to evolve to meet the growing needs and challenges of our time, both the challenges within ourselves and in society at large. But I'm confident that it's going to make it through the ups and downs of the changing seasons. In an early platform, Weston used a nature metaphor that I'm going to use as my conclusion here to promote the value of change that this society is now facing. He said that the beauty of the autumn leaves is often but the splendor which precedes decay. It is often the sign that era of new transformations is awaiting. Religion has its latent, abiding forces from which time to time must assume new forms and expressions. And to throw off the past ones merely means giving to those vital forces a freer and fuller scope. In another talk on October 17th of 1887, titled The Crying Need of Modern Society, Weston offers us this important reminder. Let us not forget the high nature of our task, the sacredness of our cause, or the principles we proclaim, but give to the ethical society our undivided allegiance, our loyal adherence, and make it a real force in the community against existing wrongs, against indifferentism and moral lethargy that so widely pervades. Then we shall be doing our part towards meeting the crying need of modern society. Thanks very much.